Good morning. This is Paul Petrov, and you're listening to episode number 2 of the morning show for managers. The topic for this morning is the arc of distortion. Now, generally, there are only two big roadblocks in your work as a manager. And the first roadblock is your ego, and the second one are the blind spots that you have. Now, the arc of distortion will help you identify some of these blind spots. I'll give you a couple of examples from my own management practice and also from the practice and scenarios and the cases that I have identified working with a lot of managers throughout the years. And by the end of the episode, I will also provide a couple of questions for self-reflection so that you can really go a little bit deeper on your own and identify some of the blind spots that you might have as a manager. Now, first things first, let's first have a common understanding about what the arc of distortion is all about. Now, distortion, this term actually comes from the physics, so it is a scientific term, but it is also used in the management practice. So basically, it means that there's a difference between the good intentions that you have as a manager and probably the bad impact that you might have on your team. Now, the thing is that we judge ourselves on the good intentions that we have, but the people around us judge us on the impact that we have on them and on their work. Now, let's take a specific example. Now, let's imagine that you have a person from your team that is usually late for meetings. Now, you have a good intention to give him some feedback on the impact that he has coming late to meetings, and you have a good intention really to improve their timeliness, all right? And you provide a feedback. Let's say a person is coming late for a meeting and you provide a feedback in front of everybody that it is unacceptable, it's not professional, he should not be late anymore. All right, you have a good intention, but the impact that you might have is various, and chances that if you provide this negative feedback in front of all of the team, you might have very negative impacts, because imagine that you provided the feedback without even asking what is the reason and what's going on with this person. And imagine that he had an accident, a car accident, or something that was not on your mind when you started providing this feedback. And now imagine what would be the impact of your feedback if this person had an accident, but anyway managed to be to come to the meeting, although he's late, but anyway he did his best and he's late. What do you think is the impact that you have if you provide a feedback without really asking what's going on? And chances that you have a very negative impact on the person, and he'll say you may imagine what he will say as feedback to you, and also for feedback as how you treat him, etc., etc. But the thing is very simple. You judge yourself on the good intention that you have, but the people from your team will judge you on the impact that you have. Now, if you are not aware of the impact that you have, this arc of distortion will be a huge one. And this is the point of this podcast. Just the first thing is to make you aware that there's a difference between the good intentions that you have and the impact that you might have on the people that you're working with. And the second thing is what you can do about this. And one thing that you can do for sure is just to be aware that there is a difference between the good intentions, because the thing is that we tend to justify our bad behavior with our good intentions. So even if you are emotionally charged and scream at somebody because he did not deliver, let's say, something for your project, yes, you have a good intention, really to get the attention and really to explain how important the thing is. But nobody likes to be screamed at, you including. So, but in the same time, you might justify your bad behavior with your good intention. And we do it all the time. You do it all the time. And now, before I wrap up this episode, I would just invite you to think of what are some other situations that you might have bad impact while bad impact on the outside while you have very good intentions. So what do you think is the impact when you try to help somebody and you check on them quite too often? In other words, you turn into a micromanager. What do you think is the impact? So you have the good intention to help somebody do their work, but the bad impact that you might have is that you actually make an impression that you don't trust the people that you are working with, right? So the good intention is to help them, but the bad impact is that you don't trust them. So this was another example of an arc of distortion that you might have. So it's a classical blind spot that you might have as a manager. So now, just to wrap things up, I will invite you again to think just for only one possible bad impact that you might have on your team, to identify what is the good intention. And the easiest way to do is to see a situation from your work, and specifically from the last week, very specifically from the last week, when there was misalignment of the expectations between you and between somebody from your team. So you wanted to do something, you did your best, but you had a negative impact. So just take a few minutes to reflect on what was your intention, what was the impact, and most importantly, what can you do differently so that to decrease this arc of distortion. And here, probably just to wrap this podcast up, I'll give you one or two ideas on how you can close the arc of distortion. The first thing is to provide broader context of where you are coming from. This is so that the people really get why you are screaming. It's not that I justify screaming at the office, but this is a specific example that if you explain that you are under pressure and you probably will have problems with the client or with a stakeholder for not providing or not keeping the timeline that you have promised. So when you provide this bigger context for your colleagues, they will understand. So there will be, the arc of distortion will be smaller. Another way to decrease the arc of distortion is to communicate a little bit, to communicate in a way that the other person understands you. So this is probably a topic for another podcast, the different personality types. But if the person really needs more details and is more analytical, it makes sense. And you are on the other side more result oriented and also analytical, chances are that you have misalignment about the way of your communication and what you understand while you are talking to each other. So the thing is, one way to close the arc of distortion is to figure out first for yourself what is your personality type, and you can do personality type tests wherever you want. And so the first thing is to know yourself, what is your personality type, and but the other thing is to take time and to see and really to understand what is the personality type of the other person that you're talking to, and more importantly, the personality types of all the people in your team. So this is another way to close the arc of distortion that everybody has, every manager has, but it is your responsibility to take some steps and to role model and closing the arc of distortion, because you have the arc of distortion, but also the people from your team have the very same arc of distortion. They have some good intentions, but that have bad impact on you. Like if I use an example, when somebody is late with the delivery of or with some deliverable, so they have the good intention to make it perfect, but bad impact is that they are late. And for you, it wasn't about perfection, it was about speed, and you have, so the other person has an arc of distortion, so they will judge themselves based on the good intentions to make things right, but you judge them on the bad impact on you that you are late. So this was it, the second episode of the podcast Morning Show for Managers. I wish you to have a nice day, and until the next time.